Hey, Rebel Rouser. I'm Alan Voivod, and this is Star Wars 7 by 7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy. And thank you so much for joining me for it. And thank you especially to the patrons who help make this possible for you every single day with their support at patreon.com/SW7x7. All right, we are here for the second half of my conversation with Cass Sunstein. And just the quick refresher, Cass is the Robert Walmsley University professor at Harvard Law School. From 2009 to 2012, he was administrator of the White House Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs. Since that time, he has served in the U.S. government in several different roles, an advisor to many nations and international organizations. He is the author of Nudge with Richard Thaler, Noise with Daniel Kahneman and Olivier Siboni, The World According to Star Wars, more on that in a second, and Wiser with Reed Hasty. So The World According to Star Wars was a beautiful little book that Cass wrote a few years back, and that was the first time that he came onto the podcast to talk about that and his affinity for Star Wars. And he has included Star Wars and George Lucas and his journey in his upcoming book, How to Become Famous, with the subtitle Lost Einsteins, Forgotten Superstars, and How the Beatles Came to Be. It's coming out May 21st. And yeah, there's a whole ton of stuff in there aside from Star Wars stuff that's really awesome and fascinating. But of course, we're here for the Star Wars stuff. And that is most of what I wanted to talk about with Cass while I had him on the show. So let's dive into it. Here is the second half of my conversation with Cass Sunstein, the author of the upcoming How to Become Famous. And I got to thinking about this in terms of a reference that you cite throughout the book called the Music Lab Experiment. And I was wanting to ask you, well, first I'll ask you to explain for our audience what the Music Lab Experiment is and then how it bears on the conversation related to Star Wars. But I also wanted to ask you about your thoughts of people taking their own social expectations and conditioning into an experiment like that with them, so that even though they are not necessarily subject to that potential reputation effect, network effect, but they still, they can't go in completely clean, for lack of a better way of putting it. So I'll start by asking you, what's the Music Lab Experiment about?
Okay. In the experiment, there's a condition where the control condition where people visit a website and there are dozens of songs and they can download the ones they like. And then after a run of thousands of visitors, you could have a ranking of what people in the control condition, what they like. And that, let's call that the reliable model of what songs people like. Mm-hmm. The treatment conditions, people are sorted into subgroups by the technology where they can see not only the songs, but how many people have downloaded them. So there are 8 different subgroups. So you're sorted into subgroup, let's say with thousands of people, and you see that a song, and this is a real one, Trapped in an Orange Peel, is the most popular, just because in the first hour, people were downloading it a lot. Now let's suppose you're in another world where you're seeing that a song called I Am Error, and that's actually a song in the experiment, these are real songs, is being downloaded a lot. And the question is whether knowledge about what other people are downloading and what's getting popular or not in the early days and hours will influence eventual popularity. I think I'd be inclined to think that in the end, the most popular songs in the control group will be mimicked in the treatment group, that in the end, quality will win out, and you'll see a ranking that will be pretty much identical to the various groups. I think I might have predicted that. Mm-hmm. So Star Wars is going to be at the top, and let's say Star Club will be at the bottom because it's a movie called Star Club that's not a great movie. But my prediction would have been wrong, that while the very best songs, the very top songs never completely tanked, and the very worst songs never rose to the top. Otherwise, anything could happen. So Trapped in an Orange Peel could, in one world, do really well, and another world do really badly. I Am Error could be a smash hit in one world and a terrible failure in another world, which suggests that the intrinsic quality of the song was often defeated by the serendipitous fact of early downloads. And I think this is a beautiful experiment and also profound, where is there someone around who is as talented as Taylor Swift, who never made it? It breaks my heart to say so, but the answer must be yes. Are
Hmm.
there people in the time of the first Star Wars trilogy who were making movies with not the same, but with either were or could have made movies with the same uh, creativity and burst of technological and storytelling innovation? It breaks my heart to say so, but the answer is surely yes. And maybe they couldn't get funding, maybe they didn't have the right name, maybe they had writer's block on a Monday morning. And so that's the Music Lab. Welcome to our world.
Hmm. You actually put me in mind, Leslie Headland, who is creating the Acolyte TV series or Disney Plus series, has talked about how Lucas paved the way for her, and that with dragging all of movie theaters into digital production, into digital projection, that a filmmaker like her would not necessarily have the opportunity to create a series like that. And so he ended up paving the way for someone like her to be able to tell a Star Wars story to a larger audience.
That's fantastic. That about a wide range of things that George Lucas did, serendipitously, because he got to do it, made possible a bunch of amazing people. Without Lucas, we would never have seen them. Now, you can get kind of very specific. If Lucas's parents hadn't been in a romantic mood on the mood on the night in which, or in the hour in which
Hmm.
he was created, then we'd be in a very different culture.
That's right. And there you have a sliding doors section in your book as well. And you could say that about so many elements of Lucas's life. If, the fact that he was, for all intents and purposes, rebelling against his father, who wanted him to be in the office supply business, and he didn't want to do that. And, his desire to be a street racer, and then getting into an accident that nearly ended his life and sent him in another direction. Like these are different kinds of serendipity, but it's amazing how all of it just adds up into one particular life, and one that happened to become remarkable.
I can say that I had the privilege of working for President Obama for 4 years, and I uh, have seen him recently, and I got to teach with him at the University of Chicago. And he's very alert to the fact that the things that got him in the position to be president were numerous and had good fortune surrounded by them. So the fact, I'm a big fan of President Obama, I should say, the fact that no one else needs to be, this is just not a political show,
Yep.
but just take the fact he did get to be president. Now, how did that happen?
Mhm.
Various things had to break right. And that's true for George Lucas. It's true for Luke Skywalker, and they broke wrong for Anakin.
So, in terms of the things that you share about the lead up to the launch of A New Hope Star Wars in theaters, one of the things that also strikes me is just how negative not only everybody around George Lucas was about the prospects for the movie, but about how negative Lucas was himself, that he was convinced that the best it would do is break even. So, is there anything to that negativity about how it was, I mean, how it's still able to succeed even with the negativity that surrounded it in the lead up to its release?
That's a great question. So I'm thinking that to be very optimistic, you might end up really disappointed, but that can be energizing. So if
Hmm.
you think I've got the best movie or I've got the best book in the world that's going to do spectacularly well, that can get the whole team prepared to push hard for it. And if you're thinking this isn't so good, it's not likely to be as well positioned. I think the fact that Lucas himself in the studio, et cetera, ranged from pessimistic to it's going to be okay, was not a positive for Star Wars. That Star Wars did super well, notwithstanding that.
Mm.
That you're better off thinking if you're an athlete, I'm going to be world champion rather than I'm going to lose early. Optimism's good, though if you're optimistic, your hopes might be dashed.
Hmm. Yeah, I guess there's a line to be drawn between realistic optimism and unrealistic optimism, I suppose.
Yes, and unrealistic optimism often is productive. So there's a work by a great economist named Albert Hirschman who talks about how development projects are often launched with unrealistic optimism that they'll work, that there are all sorts of obstacles that aren't anticipated, and if people had foreseen them and been realistic rather than optimistic, they wouldn't have started. But they turn out being often the people very creative at meeting the obstacles. So Hirschman's view is that unrealistic optimism is actually very fortunate for development. He calls it a hiding hand
Hmm.
process. And that's true also for cultural things as well. I'm thinking we can think of some more recent Star Wars triumphs that probably had a feature of optimism on the part of the writers and producers in circumstances in which the writers or producers weren't so weren't so realistic, but it turned out their optimism created a self-fulfilling prophecy.
And it does feel like, as you describe that Lucas's situation with the original Star Wars feels like there was a self-fulfilling prophecy to it in a sense, because even with his, with the negativity that he had, or at least his private reservations, I guess, for lack of a better, that he still proceeded with unrealistic optimism, even in the face of the obstacles that he was facing, because he was having to invent new technology to tell the story. He was encountering resistance from not only 20th Century Fox, but also even his own friends like Francis Ford Coppola and Brian De Palma. And yet he managed to find a way through all of these things.
This is a great point. So I'm tempted to say that when he was doing it, he was in a frenzy of creativity and he knew it.
Hmm.
That you might be willing to say, is this going to do very well? Probably not. But also to say, this, I love this. Now, I'm tempted to say that, and I think there is truth in it. But Lucas's writing and doing of A New Hope was famously not a joyful period. It was really hard for him.
Hmm.
Both can be true. It can be true that it's a form of torture for people to engage in something of immense creativity, but they're into it in a way that is it has the word, I'm not sure, there's probably a German word, there isn't an English word. I'm trying to go in the direction of joyful, but that's
Hmm.
smiley. It's more, my hunch, this is speculative, that there was an inner confidence he had, not that it would do well, but that it was good. And
Hmm.
he knew that, I think. I'm not sure the most reliable witness here is George Lucas himself.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what he'd say would be true. It's a long time ago. And to remember your mood when you're in that period of extraordinary creativity, it's not obvious that one can.
That's right. But, certainly thought at least that it was work worth doing and following through, because he actually ultimately did. And so, does that feel like a reasonable comparison to your process in writing this book? Was it torturous, or was it completely joyful? How was the experience for you?
I've never had so much fun.
Ah,
The only rival in my professional work is my Star Wars book, where I had a ton of fun also. This one was like being able to skate and being at the most beautiful ring you ever imagined and jumping up and landing. That's how it felt, jumping up and landing and you don't fall. So I usually do academic books with law and lots of footnotes. This has a lot of footnotes, but it isn't
yeah.
an academic book. It's I can't get within a trillion miles of George Lucas, but I did have a feeling of exuberance and laughter while I was doing this book.
And I will say it comes through even even in the non-Star Wars parts as well. So congratulations on the book. It's called How to Be Famous. It is coming out. It will, I believe, May 21st. Is that the date?
I think that's the day.
Yep, I think this will be out live before then. So people will have to keep an eye out for it in local bookstores and online, wherever you get your books. And I wish you the best of success with it. Cass Sunstein, thank you so much for joining me on the show. For anybody who wants to keep up with you and what you're doing in the world, where should people keep in touch with you or follow your journeys?
Thank you for that. So, on websites that list books, my books are listed on those websites. I teach at Harvard. You can see my website at Harvard Law School, and this is a little ridiculous, but it's true. The Social Science Research Network is where I publish all my papers, and most of them I can't say are even a little bit interesting, but maybe a few of them aren't without interest.
And I'll link to those at the blog post for this show's episode at sw7x7.com. Cass, it's been a joy to talk with you again. Thank you so much for your time. And again, congratulations on the new book.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
And there you go. That's going to do it with my conversation with Cass Sunstein, the author of the upcoming How to Become Famous. And that's going to do it for this episode of the podcast. If you enjoy the show, please help more people find out about this daily dose of Star Wars joy. You can do that by telling your friends online or offline. You can do it by telling the algorithms with ratings and reviews and likes and subscribes and joins and follows and all that fun stuff. And you can even help me produce this daily dose of Star Wars joy on a regular basis for fans all over the world. And you can learn more about that at patreon.com/SW7x7. And it just remains for me to say thank you so much for joining me for this episode, as always. And may the Force be with you, wherever in the world you may be.
7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited, or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.